Welcome back, everyone. So recently I did a video talking about my history with the Sega Saturn. Now, I wanted to do the same thing with the NES, however there are two games that I do not currently have in my collection that my grandmother did have when I was a kid. And while I've come across those games numerous times out in the wild, I went out today with the intent to buy them, couldn't find them. So we're going to jump ahead and talk about some games that I love, but I did not play as a kid, so let's get right to it. So some of these games we're not going to talk too much about because you're probably going to be like, really, James, you didn't play that game as a kid? What the hell? If my grandmother didn't have it, I probably didn't play it. So let's move on. So first up, we're gonna knock out two games really quick. Contra and Super C. Even if my grandmother had these games when I was a kid, I probably wouldn't have played them much. But then again, I did play Commando. While difficult, these games are a lot of fun. I love fast-paced action and both games have plenty of it. Not to brag, but I have beaten Contra with the Konami code, of course. Which doesn't necessarily make the game easier, just achievable. Recently I picked up the Contra Anniversary Collection on the Switch. Highly recommend checking that out, it's definitely worth the $20. Next up, speaking of difficult, Ninja Gaiden. This is one I've been determined to beat, and thanks to the NES Classic, I have been able to make it to the final stage. I really wish there was a password system. It's so hard for me to sit down and beat a game from beginning to end. Even though it's difficult, it is fun. The controls are great, the wall jumping is super fun, and just like Contra, it's definitely fast-paced. I have played a little bit of the second one, but I haven't played any of the third yet, but I do hear they get more difficult. Next up, Journey to Silius. This is one I didn't really appreciate much at first. I had a hard time getting through the first stage, but one day the wife and I decided to give it another chance, and I was hooked. If you didn't know, this game was originally based on the Terminator, but the license was lost during development. Which is sad because I feel like this would have been one of the better movie-based games on the NES, which isn't saying much. If you haven't given this game a chance, definitely check it out. Next up, another classic that you're probably going to be like, seriously, James, what the fuck was wrong with your childhood? You missed out on so much. Castlevania. Well, this is another game I probably wouldn't have played much as a kid. If I do recall, I'm fairly certain I did play Castlevania 3 as a kid, but couldn't make it very far. This is one that I'm proud to say I've beaten a couple of times. I will say that while it's difficult, once you figure out what to do, it can get easier. The key is to, well, not die. A lot of times there's a sub-weapon earlier in the stage that makes the later part of the stage and boss way easier. But if you die, you start at a checkpoint and can't get that weapon back. And while I do appreciate the checkpoints, they kind of work against you at the same time. For example, I had a hell of a time with Frankenstein, but the first time I was able to hold on to the holy water throughout the whole stage, I beat him no problems. But as you probably already know, the holy water is the way to go in this game. Hopefully in the future I'll do a video much like the one I did for Mega Man since I'm working on beating all the earlier Castlevania games. Next up we have Batman. That was stupid, let me do that again. Next up we have the only DC superhero I like. Insert your hate comments below. Batman! Even though this game is apparently based on Tim Burton's Batman, I don't see many similarities. But that doesn't take anything away from this game. While again difficult, it is fun. Just like Ninja Gaiden, I love the wall jumping mechanic. My biggest complaint with this game though is the fact that the start and select buttons are swapped. You use start to select your weapons and select to pause the game, which causes a lot of confusion for me. But in a way it makes sense to have all the action buttons next to each other. It doesn't ruin the game in any way though. This is one that I am determined to spend some more time on and beat. So last up we have Ducktales and Ducktales 2. I was kind of skeptical about this game though because I didn't understand how well they could make a DuckTales game. But this is what I love about the primitive nature of classic games. They have to think outside the box. The pogo mechanic, while a simple concept, definitely makes the game unique and enjoyable. I love bouncing around, killing enemies, and finding hidden gems. And you have to admire how well the game represents the characters so well. But anyway, those are just a few NES games that I love but did not play as a kid. It really tells you something about these classic games. They're timeless and it makes collecting them so special, and there's so many more to be discovered. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you again soon.